We are back in the nerd zone with one of the OG of all OG Yang Gang members, Zach Graumann, the big coat guy, is back on the show. Welcome, Zach, and hello, nerds.
Hello, nerds. God, I miss you guys. I really do. There was some really special moments I always think back on, and so many special people I met through the Yang Gang. I will say, I think a lot of you appreciate this, is that literally we're recording this right before Thanksgiving. On the Monday before Thanksgiving, I took out the big coat again because it's officially cold enough. And every year, I'm like, big coat guy's back.
He has returned. Yeah,
I love that coat, man. I'll plug it. It's a Lululemon puffy jacket, like knee length, and it's probably one of the greatest things I own. It's so warm because in New York, you gotta handle the elements yourself. It's not like people live in the Midwest. There gets cold in the Midwest. Yes, it does. But what do? You go in your garage, you turn on your car, you heat it up, and then you drive to your parking garage, right? And that's warm enough. But in New York, you may be 4 blocks away from the subway, but that's 4 blocks you got to walk in the elements. You're not taking a cab there. So yeah, man, need a big coat. Big coat guy lives on.
I hear you. It's actually getting pretty chilly here in Northern California. It's like 56, which is kind of cold for these parts.
I don't know. Climate change is a version of real. Maybe the hype was a little I think there's some narratives that have been missed, but the weather is definitely changing. So
it would appear so. Well, so I wanted to hit 3 kind of areas with you, Zach. The first was I'd love to hear some reflections on the Dean Phillips campaign, as was it co-campaign manager or campaign manager? I don't know what the title was, but
it was so funny because I was like, when I worked for Andrew, I'm like, I'm campaign manager, and I'll like lean into that as like a character in this thing. And then since in other campaigns, I'm like, don't tell anybody I'm here. Like, but I was campaign manager on that one too. I don't. Jeff Weaver, who was Bernie Sanders' campaign manager and worked with me on Dean, he had a joke, and he's older, so he would I don't know if he wouldn't use this the right way, but he'd always be like, hashtag only manage once, only manage one time. So he was like calling me a sucker for managing multiple presidential campaigns. You just do one maybe. But yes, I was campaign manager for Dean. And man, I hope y'all are doing okay. Tom, I hope you're doing okay post-election, because I know you actually did work. It's a lot, man.
Yeah, I mean, it was I will say I left New Hampshire with a new level of respect and admiration for people who work on political campaigns, because that was, I was only there for like 3 weeks, and it was physically very taxing, especially on the advance team. I mean, those guys work.
Advance a hard job, and we had a really good and lean advance team. Conrad Taylor, I think, is a superstar.
Yeah.
And you get the right advance team, they run the campaign in many ways, because they make a lot of final decisions. They got the slogans and the energy. At a certain level, it's less so because you're just like executing rallies. But in like a grassroots younger campaign, they're driving a lot. But yeah, I mean, look, I'd say I did a podcast with Andrew, like kind of digesting this, and it's very frustrating because this election was predictable and avoidable in terms of the results. And we can say that without the criticism of Monday morning quarterbacking, or I think a lot of people, it's very annoying when people are like, the Dems lost for this reason. And it's like, first of all, where were you in January of 2020? Or and earlier, where were you when I know what most people are doing? We're criticizing me or Dean or folks on the team for sounding the alarm. We did the work because we knew this would be predictable and avoidable. We knew that Joe Biden was too old to run, and started not too old is the wrong term, but he was losing his mental facilities, and they knew it, and they were covering up. And we also knew that, and everybody in the Yang Gang knew this. I think most people in 2020 knew this when they were looking at their candidates, that we knew that Kamala wasn't a good candidate. And Would a better candidate won? I think so, but I could see arguments maybe a better candidate may not have won, but they certainly would have made it closer. And it's sad that we've had this narrative that Donald Trump is the devil and he's Hitler, and I'm not exaggerating. These were not the devil maybe, but the Hitler fascism thing was a real argument for the Democrats. And we said all this, yet we didn't, do it like run a smart, thoughtful primary, and we weren't smart and thoughtful about our current president in office to think about how we're going to beat him. And here we are. Trumpism is back, man.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like if we had a primary, at the normal time, like in January, and if we had a couple of governors in there who weren't part of the Biden administration who could have some separation, I think it could have been really close and we might have pulled out a win. But certainly, as much as I don't think Kamala was a great candidate, like, giving her the ball 100 days left, like,
that's really didn't help her.
That's tough. And
Agreed.
I agree with you. She wasn't a terrific candidate. She had a great start. I got to give her.
Yeah, the vibes were great. And I think a lot of people are sick of Trumpism.
Yeah.
And you watch him debate and you're not like thrilled with this guy. But he has a version of his own Trump honesty, whichever that is. But it's Trump authenticity is really probably the better word. And the Dems just didn't have a message. Trump always has a message. You may not like it, you may hate it, you may think it's demeaning and anti this and XYZ, fine, but it's a message. And
you know what it is. Yeah.
I don't know what the Dems message was this time. And there were certain, the party's got a lot of reflection to do, which I hope we do. I say we, like we're Democrats. I don't know what I am anymore at this point. But I told this to Andrew. I was like, I'm tired of being right on this while the country suffers. You know what I mean? I don't mean that with like an ego. I'm just like, man, I told you, like, we went out there and we sacrificed and we did it, and you did it. You were there, Tom. And predictable and avoidable, man. Here we are.
Yeah. What I'm curious what was the path for you to join the campaign like that? It must have come together pretty quickly, right? Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, probably too quickly. I was running this startup. I had like just gone on Andrew's podcast. I talk about Andrew's podcast like I've been on a lot. I haven't been on that often, but I was just on there probably that summer to talk about, we were trying something around volunteer rewards points and finding financial ways to incentivize company to give more money to charity and people do more good. So the concept was you volunteer at Habitat for Humanity, wherever you want, you get 100 points, and we had tech that you could scan a QR code and verify it, and et cetera. And then we would convince Chipotle that's worth a free burrito, something like that.
Right.
It was very difficult to get people to pay. All three of the legs of that stool, the charities, the companies, and the volunteers, all three were very reluctant to participate. Specifically the volunteers, like people are not volunteering very often, which is hard. And so we've kind of pivoted a number of different things, but I was running that, and Andrew, I guess he gets connected with Dean, and Dean's like, I'm running, like I'm doing it, like, and this was like October, right, of last year, 2023, which is a very late time to run. For context, when we were running for president, like the race was just heating up. And so like Andrew was a thing by then, let's put it that way. Like Andrew had officially, it was doing 20,000 people rallies at that point. Not that big, but pretty big. So very late to the game. You were like 3 months out from New Hampshire. But Dean was like, Andrew was funny. He's like, I think he needs a manager. I don't think he has anyone in charge. And that was certainly true. Like I went to Manchester, New Hampshire to a Dean event. And they certainly were, Dean was compelling and had a really good, I like candidates that have a really good why. I think it's really important, especially on a presidential, but almost always like, why are you running? Why should I listen to you? Why should I put down my TikTok and listen to what you have to say. And Dean certainly had one. I thought he was compelling. He's an interesting guy. I think he's a good guy, a good man. And I also like candidates that are men or women of integrity. I think that's really important to me because this system will twist you. It'll break you, especially at the presidential level. And I thought Dean had that. And so I was like, I'll pause the startup for a bit and take 3 months and essentially move to Manchester and
beautiful Manchester.
And it was, beautiful and awful, like most campaigns are, right? Like it's a grind and it's crazy and stressful. I think I got an ulcer at one point from all the fast food I was eating. I had to take a day off. But other than that, you're just kind of grinding. And the hardest part of campaigns, in my opinion, they're nonstop, right? Where it's like you wake up, you check your phone, and there's a million things you miss, and then you're just going, flooring the gas pedal until 11 to midnight, and then you keep going, and it's tough. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm like a builder. I like, and I'm a big picture guy in a lot of ways. I don't say that. I think sometimes people say that they don't want to do work. That's not what I'm saying. But I like to take a step back and think about things, be really intentional. That's very hard on a campaign because it's just stimulation. It's tough to see the forest for the trees. But yeah, that's how I mean, honestly, I went to an event and they're like, it was so funny. Dean was, I had a good conversation with Dean. And then I had the staff went out for drinks and the staff was like, please come. Like we need someone needs to be in charge. And I was probably the only person they could have hired because anyone that's like make a career in politics and particularly with the Democratic Party, they were blackballed. You couldn't touch Dean with a 40-foot pole. And we had plenty almost every day when I was trying to recruit people to join, they're like, I can't help you because I'll lose my Democratic DNC clients, et cetera, et cetera. And that's a real thing. That's a consulting class. And you need some experience to win and to operate in politics, especially at the presidential level. Actually, you can argue it matters even more at the local level sometimes. But yeah, if you're not on team A or B, it's very difficult to work. If you're on team A or B, it's very difficult to work for something that's not A or B, right? I'm sure you guys seen this with the Forward Party. It's a brutal, somewhat, I would argue, corrupt on both ends, sort of way we operate. I don't particularly like it. I don't think it's good for democracy or the country, but it's the way it goes.
Yeah, it's ironic because like in the Democratic Party, there's a lot of support for what Lena Khan is doing at the FTC, getting into industries and saying, hey, this is not competitive. There's not room for new entrants. The incumbents are using unfair methods to kind of stack the deck in their favor. And part of me, like, I look at our current political system, I'm like, well, that is, the definition of a duopoly at the moment, right?
That's probably a good, I don't know enough about Lena to make a real educated opinion. I've heard people praise her and I've heard people like the All In guys, if you listen to that podcast, they hate her.
Yeah. They don't love her.
And I think, I don't agree with everything they say, but I think they're all generally can be pretty smart and relatively thoughtful. So I see the pros and cons, but I will argue, I think there are two things I like. One is that the rules of old don't apply as easily anymore. The kind of antitrust laws we've had don't really apply to a Google because Andrew used to say this on the trails, like no one wants to use the third best search engine. They want to use the one that searches everything, which makes sense. Also, but to your point, if we're gonna be that critical about our businesses, we should also look in the mirror and apply it to our government in many ways. And that's somewhat what Trump and Elon, I guess, are talking about. And parts of that I think are great. Parts of that I think could be crazy. We're going to find out, right?
Yeah. So I'm curious, like the New Hampshire primary outcome, I mean, it was respectable. 19% for a campaign that started, pretty much in December or whenever, November, with a relatively unknown congressman, like not too shabby. Do you like when you think back, do you think there's anything you could have done to get it to 30% or the campaign could have done to get it to 33 or something?
Yeah, you could. I mean, you could always hindsight, and there were stuff I thought we could have done a little better in the moment too. I think, it's so on one end, like I think, 19%. Like, I mean, you're not close to winning at 19%, but I do think in 3 months, it's pretty impressive. A couple things didn't work for us. One, we like that 3-month period, you still only had like 50% name ID or so. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty good given that you're getting 20% of the whole pie, but you're getting almost half of the people who know you exist. That's compelling. And we did have data that if people knew who Dean was and knew his bio, they were willing to vote for him, particularly in New Hampshire. And so, you give him 3 to 6 more months. I think it's a real shot there. I think the Biden campaign did a pretty proactive write-in campaign down the stretch. That didn't help. I think the independents, like Nikki Haley staying in that race after Iowa, hurt us because it's an open primary in New Hampshire. So all those independents that's almost certainly would have voted for Dean didn't come our way. I think it's really tough to get a concrete message outside of, hey, Joe's not fit to run anymore, and something that can unite the party and that's true to Dean, I think that's important. I know we'd looked at, things like coming out harder against the war or, the war in Gaza or other things. And I think it was, you got to do it ways that Dean really is thoughtful on and can be authentic to. So, maybe, it's like woulda, coulda, shoulda. I think the other piece is like, I don't know if Dean we had looked at, there's historical precedent that if you get more than 40% or so in New Hampshire, there's precedent for presidents dropping out. It's kind of a, canary in the coal mine symbol that your candidacy is shot. I don't know if we actually would have. I think we may have had to win the thing for the press to even take it seriously, and even then, they may have still dismissed it. Like I think the press is certainly in the bag for the Democratic Party on this race. So that was tough too, and it's tough you got to crowdfund, you have to fundraise, and people want to think you can win and you got momentum, so you have to, it's tough once they start tallying votes,
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty proud of New Hampshire. I was most bummed when I saw South Carolina's results. Like, what was there anything that could have been? I mean, it was so.
I don't think we should have gone, but in the sense of, the South Carolina machine is a machine. Very, very, very few people vote. So the people that vote in the South Carolina primary generally are part of the party apparatus. Like it's tiny. It's like 1% of the population voted in that thing. And so we weren't going to win any of those votes, and which is brutal. But I don't think, we didn't spend there. I wish we had, you kind of want to like, it's tough because you want to, strategically you should dismiss it, right? You should be like, hey, we're not focused on South Carolina. We're focused on Michigan or another state. The problem is like South Carolina, like large black voting population. You don't want to dismiss a large group of black people. That's not a good look. And then I don't love dismissing a state in general either, because they're people and they deserve to vote, etc. It's the way the system's set up, man. Like most people don't vote in that state, especially in a primary like that. So, but nothing. I don't, like you could have campaigned there for 3 years and probably still would have lost. So,
and Michigan.
By then it got really tough to, fundraise and run for real when you kind of lose the wind in your sails. So, I think Michigan was ripe for it, but there wasn't like the press environment, and there wasn't there wasn't a real primary to plug into, guys. Like I think, you know, that's why I think New Hampshire was really impressive, because there's no debate, there's no coverage, right? Like Yang, when we ran Yang's campaign, like sure, we were getting ignored and the Yang media blackout was real and we were very dismissed and other things, but there was still a debate. There were 7 debates or so where he got to be on that stage, right? And we qualified for him. There were plenty of outlets that would write an article on him, even if it wasn't the way you wanted to. You still got coverage. Like that was, you didn't really have that. There weren't as many reporters covering it. Like you can go down the list. So like you need, this is what primaries do. They get, frankly, in like the way our media works, like they rate pretty well. And so MSNBC, CNN, you name it, can invest in reporters and coverage, and because that costs money, right? You got to send somebody to the field, you got to put them in a hotel. You know, we stayed, all the embeds, the embedded reporters, they lived in the same hotel as us, which was fun. But there were a few in New Hampshire, and they kind of disappear after that. So, and they were there for the Republican race, to be fair. They weren't there for us. We just got them every once in a while if we timed our events right, etc. So, yeah, man, you got to see the underbelly of this. And look, I think it's stuff. I've now run 2 losing presidential campaigns. You know, so if you have a candidate that's not going to win, I'm your guy. But I've got to see this kind of underbelly of our democracy, and I've got to see this live. And it's hard to win in general, but I've been running as an outsider, very difficult. And, you know, Bernie Sanders lived that well. You know, and it's nice to get like, you know, have a little bit of like told you so vibes. And we had that from Andrew, and Bernie had that in 2016. I think Dean had it in 2024. But at the end of the day, like winning matters, right? I think we need to accept that. Like we can say told you so all you want. Trump's president, guys. Like we didn't do it.
Let me ask you this. I'm pretty sure you would never do another campaign. 2's plenty. But if you did a third one, like what would be some of the key criteria that you would think about to be convinced to work on another campaign, and then what would be some things that you'd want to make sure you help the campaign do?
Good questions, Tom. I think half of me thinks I'd want to work on a campaign that's got like a real inside track to win. I don't have to be the front runner, but like maybe it'd be nice to be in that serious contention category, because you don't have to fight for your legitimacy the whole time. That's a different, it's frankly a different comms and campaign strategy as a leader than you are as a challenger. And then to me, I liked what appealed me to Dean and certainly with Andrew was like there was like a leverage point. There was a version of like what I thought was an unlock, where it's like, hey, if Dean could make noise in New Hampshire, you know, will the party let him win? No, but or maybe probably not. But would they open up a primary? Like probably, right? It's kind of what you'd be looking at. Like Yang was the same thing, like in his own way. He's like, hey, is Yang gonna win? Like when we first started, like no way. He was this anonymous man running for president, no political experience. But could we wake the country up to automation and universal basic income? And that I felt really good about. So and heck, cash relief and UBI became a very popular policy to the point where when we had the global pandemic, like cash relief was on the table. And for the record, for that the cash relief itself was not what caused inflation. Okay, there were other excess government spending that was the bigger driver here. Giving money to people doesn't tend to cause inflation, for the record. But yeah, man, politics is really draining. It's tough on relationships. It's tough on your physical and mental health. Like I didn't have like this sounds stupid or corny. I'm like, I have dreams. Some people don't have dreams, but when I dream, or that, you know, like actual dreams, but when you go to sleep, do you dream or not? I've always been a dreamer in that sense my whole life. Like, and then after the campaign, I didn't have I would just like black out, wake up. And that was like 6 months. I didn't have a dream for like 6 to 8 months after the campaign. There's something like I felt off for a while. My family said it too. There's like, you seem a little not broken, but like funky. And I would agree. It does something to you, you know, it's a lot. And there's a reason people don't do a lot of them, you know. There's a lot of people do like a campaign or two and that's it. It's hard.
Yeah, it is. It is such an intense environment where you're like sleep deprived, but you feel like really motivated by the mission, and but there's no routine, there's no predictability. Like you're always in fight or flight kind of mode
in different environments, and
yeah.
And that's like, I think one of the criteria I do want to like, I have learned over the years is like, especially in presidential politics, but I would say at any like real level, is that your candidate has to be a version of a real warrior and kind of psychopath. Like they have to wake up every day and be the energy driver and be like, F it, we're doing this. Like, let's go. Like your staff needs to feed off that energy. And Donald Trump certainly has this. Like if you, by all accounts, like the man just grinds and his staff has to keep up with him. And I don't think Kamala had that. I didn't get the sense in 2020. I certainly didn't get it this race, and maybe she did. Like I haven't heard this past race, but it's and that's not like a knock on her from like a personal standpoint, because I don't know if I have that. I don't know how many people. Like it's hard. It's like you have to be a little like a screw loose to be. Bernie had this. Bernie's like, up at 6 a.m., like bed at midnight, like let's go. Like why aren't we doing more events? Like that's Bernie, it's like in his bones. Yang had that for a while until we killed him. And then he needed more sleep. Obama had that. I think I read his campaign manager's book. Like, by the end, they were dragging Obama out of bed.
Yeah.
It's hard.
It requires superhuman abilities. I'm curious, what are your thoughts about 2028? Like, who do you think will emerge as potential candidates for the next go round?
I think you'll get what we saw in 2020 from like the barriers to entry will be essentially zero. So anybody and their mother will run, which usually means there's be an advantage for an outsider or like an Andrew type that can look at these sort of boring senators and governors and congressmen and find their lane. So I don't know. I got my eye on like who will run. I think like Gavin Newsom's been running for president for a while. I think, we'll put this on the record. I think pros and cons of Gavin's, like he's a savvy communicator. Gavin Newsom's a good debater and a good communicator. Watch his debate with DeSantis. Like he's talented. But he's got some like California is its own mess of a state. You've got, he did the, shut down the state and then had dinner at French Laundry with no mask. Like there's some things that would kill him for especially in a national race, but maybe you look at, you're sure, like you're probably confident like Whitmer and Hochul will probably run. I like, you like the thought of Shapiro or Andy Bashir, or I think Wes Moore's pretty talented in Maryland. Ro Khanna is an interesting name I've been looking at on the left, who seems to understand tech better than most politicians. I realize that bar is low. I don't know if AOC is going to have the polling. I saw a national poll. She's at 3 or 4%. Like she's pretty well known. I don't know if she's ever going to risk that. She might as well just try and be like a Pelosi type perhaps and not risk that. I don't know. And there'll be names that come out of the woodwork, but Bashir, Wes Moore, like Shapiro, their stocks are rising. Buttigieg is going to throw his hat in the ring most likely, or his name's been floating around. And he's certainly very talented and pretty well liked and already won Iowa. That's the other thing. If you already won or did pretty well in Iowa, like that's a good place to start from. You know what I mean? So
yeah, he's not afraid to go on Fox News. I enjoy it whenever he's mixing up.
He's an excellent communicator.
Yeah.
Excellent. And one of the best policy communicators. And a lot of people I respect in politics really adore Pete. And so I think they like him better than I do, but I respect that. Like there's some, like I like him better because there's people I like and trust that really speak highly of him. I think he ran a good org. That's the other thing. It's hard. It's hard to run for president and run the organization at the same time. You have to be is a really good hirer. You have to be a really good trusting and high integrity operator. That's hard. That's really hard when your name is on the ballot and you're getting crucified in the media or whatever it is. Right. So yeah, I mean, look, Mark Cuban said this, he's been talking about this he did like a podcast swing for Kamala. And he said, that he thinks the institutions are dead on both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party side of things. And the Republican Party is just the party of Trump. It's whatever Trump wants. And the Dems, if they picked a leader, would be the party of that candidate. It was a party of Biden. And I think that's seemingly right. The Dems have more they can somewhat weaponize in the media a bit. I say weaponize in the sense of you can use it as a tool, and it doesn't always mean negative or positive. But anyway, yeah, Dems got a lot of soul searching to do, my man.
You didn't mention Kamala. Is her?
Well, we'd be very stupid to run her again. That would not be a smart move. It would be like running Hillary Clinton again. It's like, I don't think we need. And it would be one thing if Kamala performed well in certain states or district, but she didn't outperform Biden in any district. And there wasn't a sense that if people got to know Kamala, they liked her better. And that's usually a tough thing. And the sad part was, and you kind of had that with Tim Walz too. Like you didn't have a sense where people were like falling in love with a candidate the longer they got to know him. And if we're honest, Trump, we knew Trump, that sort of thing. But JD Vance had that. People who actually sat and listened to JD Vance liked him. I'm not saying they loved him, but they liked him more than just the lonely cat lady clip or whatever he kind of came out of the box with. That's when you want. There's some principles that I think the Dems need to follow. Like usually the funniest candidate will win. So I think a little more humor involved and someone that I don't want to say likable because Tim Walz on surface was likable, but someone that is like genuinely grows on you would be a candidate I would endorse. And some people say Pete has that. I'd have to ask that too. You'd want to see that in certain states, in certain communities, but Andrew had this big time. Like the longer you listen to Andrew, the more you liked him, generally speaking. So
you think Andrew has an appetite for running for elected office again, or is two enough for him as well?
That's a good question. I think, I think it's certainly something you like as a human being will always entertain because his name gets thrown out there all the time. Andrew is a why guy, similar to I am. Like he would have to have a really good reason to run. I think, and UBI is not a bad one for sure. I think he's still very passionate about that and thinks we need to do it. I think my gut, and I haven't, don't quote him on this. It's just my personal opinion. My gut says he probably thinks we need even bigger solutions to solve some of the societal disintegration and anger we're seeing now. And so he'd have to really wrap his head around that. But I guess he could. I'll help. I will not manage that campaign.
All right. We have some questions in the chat. You have a few minutes to hit
those?
those?
Baby.
All right. So Gaia wants to know what do you think the main focal point for 2028 will be? Do you think there'll be an overarching theme or, is
Gaia, good question. You know what, man? I think one of the fair criticisms, I think, of the Democratic Party of late has been its somewhat dismissal of the populist energy in this country. And so, Bernie was an obvious example of that. And so was Yang. in 2020. But I think people are angry and they don't think the system's working. And so, and by the numbers, it's true. Like we think our education, our healthcare, and our housing are all too expensive. We don't like the path forward for our kids and our families. We're probably tired of like fighting over culture wars when, most people can't afford an unexpected $500 bill where the numbers are. Like these are things, not that, representation and identity don't matter, but it's, all that stuff matters less when you can't feed your family and you don't trust your public school and your healthcare is, out the ass expensive. Like these are real problems that people are having, and they're like hierarchy of needs, like they're fundamental. So, the message in 2028 and beyond for the Democratic Party should be for the working person, for the average Joe and Jane. And, we've missed that. We missed that this cycle. And the fact that Trump is winning working class people and gaining in communities of color in places that, and not like marginal gains, like massive gains in certain communities. I mean, hello, wake up, like we're literally missing the boat. Like it's just flying right over our head. It's like, we're just missing it. So I think it should be economic populism. And probably a sense of guys, like the right question, if to get more specific, is like, Trump is going to do things that I think are, frankly, he'll do some things that are great and do some things that are awful. It's kind of what we got last time. Like he wasn't a great leader in a crisis, certainly around COVID. And I think it's one of the biggest reasons he lost. But he also floated out that he's going to work with Bernie Sanders to lower the cap on interest rates on credit cards to 10%, which I think would be massive for this country. And that's the type of thing that Democrats should be proposing, not Trump. And so I think the message will be whatever Trumpism is missing economically and for the people, that's what they should focus on. And I'm assuming my gut says it'll be healthcare, because Trump is not, what does he say? I have the beginnings
Concept
of a plan. Concept of a plan. I mean, that, if you're a Democrat and you said that, that's a joke. It's somewhat disqualifying. But here we are.
Yeah, he has different rules. I'm going to make a prediction that 28, I think, could look more like 20, in that there'll be a backlash against like incompetent leadership under Trump, and someone like a Shapiro who's like, I just get shit done. And there's not a lot of drama, but I solve problems, and that's what the country needs. Like, people might be like, oh yeah, I don't want any more of the MAGA show. Like, it's too crazy.
It's certainly possible, man. Also, it's certainly possible that we stop as Dems like falling in love with candidates the way we've been in the past. We get super, super excited. We might be jaded and pissed off and just say, that was my sense. I always thought Dean would be a good candidate in a real race, because it's like, he's just a rational guy.
Yeah.
Like, you can say things you disagree with him, but he doesn't come off as crazy. And so maybe that's a hope. I mean, the hope is that they don't burn it all down. If you're a Dem, though, it's tough. You don't want to burn it all down, but you also don't want them to be like really, really successful, because then you'll have JD Vance for 8 years, whatever it is. So who knows what this looks like, man? I have no idea. I'm pro America, so I hope they do a good job.
Yes. I agree. I mean, it would be great if he surprised us all and did a great job. Or I guess my second choice would be he does a bad enough job that the country learns about, the importance of competence and integrity. Either way, like, you could say that's a good outcome. Nicola wants to know if there's one thing that you learned from the New Hampshire experience. What was it?
I mean, I think it's a good lesson that I've had in all politics. Like, when a strength becomes a weakness, you're dead. And the Democrats, what was our strength in 2020? What was the slogan? We're going to restore the soul of America. Joe, we're going back. It was a nostalgia campaign. It was, remember Joe Biden? He was with Obama. He was the vice president for our favorite president, the first black president ever. This is the best, and we're going to heal this country. That was the message, and it was a good one. And we were getting divided, and there's COVID, and we're angry. It's like, restore the normalcy, restore democracy, right? These are things Like you had a lot of people like talking about voter fraud and this, like Joe was like back to normal, back to the rule of law sort of vibe. And then you subvert democracy to keep this dude in power who said he was going to be a bridge candidate but can't fill a sentence. You don't have a primary. You coronate Kamala Harris, who everybody knows is unpopular and didn't do well in 2020. And then you're looking around like, well, wait a second. Why didn't people vote for us? Well, we said we were the party of democracy. We, the Democrats. The Democrats said they're the party of democracy. And then what happened? They subverted democracy. They didn't do it. And so you can't, when that strength became a weakness, it was a deal breaker for a lot of people. And there's lots of little examples of that. I think that's the biggest one. So what do we learn? Like authenticity is king, man. It is king. And we need to be, and Joe was actually pretty good at being authentic, because he said stupid stuff all the time. We're all like, whatever, man, he stands for the right things. And that's fine. That's a Trump thing. He's like, Trump says stupid shit all day long. But his people are like, whatever, we know he's on our team. And he is on their team. I mean, like at least in his mind, who knows what?
Yeah. Trump was like he's like authentically nuts.
Trump's in his own team, so that's I misspoke. Trump's on. That's why I didn't vote for him. I don't think he's shown to be a real man of integrity in the truest sense of that, where you care for those weaker and less fortunate than you.
I mean, the fact that he even nominated Matt Gaetz for Attorney General of the United States is just like, what? Really?
Optimistically, you hope it was like a political move to like mess with people, but that guy seemingly sucks. So,
all right. Hey, do you do anything with the Forward Party? People are wondering, like, well, where's the Forward Party gonna be? What are they gonna be doing?
I think I haven't done much of the Forward Party, mainly because politics gives me an ulcer, it seems. I think this is my thoughts, personal thoughts. I think everything the Forward Party is doing is a version of what needs to happen. Like we need to have open primaries. We need to get ranked choice voting. We need versions of real democracy reform. And we need more political parties. I believe in all of that. And no one's doing it. Forward Party is the only one that seemingly has their act together to do anything. And so for that, I commend it. And they're awesome. And thank God they're doing it. Right. So all that could be true. I think what Forward Party could do better, I don't know. I think it's tough. To me, it's I learned this with Andrew, is like the right policy idea. Let's call it universal basic income. Let's call it rewriting the rules of the economy. Let's call it humanity first sort of vibes and principles. That means nothing to people, the average person, average voter, until they fall in love or get behind an Andrew Yang or a candidate that's saying it. And so people are more easily connected to people than they are even the ideas, or the ideas come to life when a person that they like and trust breathes life into them. And so like there's plenty of stuff that Bernie says on policy that many people maybe wouldn't fully agree with, but they trusted him. They loved him, and so I think Forward could use a really strong candidate to make a lot of the arguments being made that's running for a race people care about, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's probably where Forward would take off, in my opinion. But there's a lot of blocking and tackling and real work needs done even before you get there. So, I'm outside looking in. I don't actually know the nitty gritty of that. I'm curious. I maybe should ask what folks that work on the Forward Party actually think about that. And they probably tried some things too.
Yeah, I know more about tech startups than political party startups, but when I look at the Forward Party, I feel like they are peanut buttering too many different things. They should just try and narrow their focus, do a few things really well, or do one thing really well, and get some wins that way. But I'm just from the cheap seats. Hope they do well. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I honestly don't know enough about them. I think it's really hard. I think it's you're also fighting a large movement towards anti-institutionalism. And if you're pro-democracy, you're somewhat pro-institution, even if you are a change from the current institutions. So that's a tough sell, Yeah. So it's
some quickies here. We have 3 more. Did Dean do a lot of podcasting? He was on All In. But did he try to do more and then he just couldn't get access, or was that not part of the
He
strategy?
did a good amount. He did All In. He did Barry Weiss's podcast. He did Honestly. He did Mario Nalfall. It was a big, I guess the podcast, like a big X show. We did, and we very much tried to do a bunch. We did a couple others. We did I'm blanking. We did a couple of these. So yes.
Like, did we do all that we could, or did we decide, hey, we need to spend time on other things?
No, we were trying to do as many as we could. I would argue we did all we could. It's like one of the things about politics too. It's not. There were narratives like, "Oh, thank God for Joe Rogan, because or else Andrew would have been nothing." Like, because that podcast was mainly credited for like taking off his candidacy, and it's always a combination of things, and because that's marketing in general, right? So Andrew, the reason Joe Rogan worked so well was because Andrew had been running for a year before then. So when you looked him up and went down the YouTube rabbit hole after that podcast, you could hear him on Sam Harris. You could hear him on a couple other shows. You had lots of YouTube videos. You had lots of social media videos. And it was still a little raw and dirty, and it got better once we started raising real money, frankly. But there was content to sink your teeth into and, frankly, fall in love with. And, even like going on All In once, you get 500,000 views, and they're like, oh, that's cool, that's interesting. Some donate, some listen, but then there needs to be more. And the reality is, you did in 3 months. Like, you can't, when you see these quote overnight successes in any industry, Chappelle Roan, what's her name, my wife loves her, like, she's been around for a long time. When that overnight success is usually a byproduct of a lot of grinding and coming out, like Morgan Wallen, Country Song. Like, you can look him up. That guy was performing to the tiny audiences for about a year and a half before he took off. And so there was, frankly, just not enough time. But yeah, we did a lot of podcasts. I wish we could have done more. We kind of took everything we got.
Did we try to get on Rogan?
Yeah, but he's, it was probably too early, I think if we won or did well in New Hampshire, he certainly would have had all of them, right? And Joe was not doing. I don't think he did any politicians since I think before this race, before he had he offered it to all of them. I think after Bernie in 2020, he stopped and didn't do them, and which I understand. Like, he's like, it's like not fun for me. The Dems should have got on there. I don't know if it would have swayed. I would have swayed some votes, certainly. But they didn't do it. Unreal.
P4 wants to know about a potential Yang Bernie coalition.
Nice.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, I love that. Honestly, I got to know Jeff Weaver, who's really one of Bernie's closest friends and advisors, and they give a shit, man. They care about the people, and I really, really vibe with that. Like, I haven't seen an example of socialism actually working, but I do believe in. I think we need to fix our healthcare system. I think we have too much corruption. I think the people are getting fucked. Pardon my French. These are all things I very much vibe with Bernie on, and he's authentic. He's core to himself. That's why I loved him. He's like, you couldn't sway him. He's a man of principle, and I love that about him, and always will.
He's also super smart.
Oh, really smart guy, and a hard ass worker, man.
He probably could have beaten Trump in 2016. I kind of feel like, but
I think so too. Yeah. It was a little more positive populism.
Yeah. I forgot to ask you if you could do one thing differently on if there were one campaign manager decision you would have changed, like, what would it be for the Phillips campaign?
What would I have done differently? I don't have a ton, man. I think the deck was so stacked against you. Like any of the things I'm going to tell you, like I don't think would have like changed much. And more like, I think we could have gone a little more populist on a policy or two. Like we never really found our like $1,000 a month or Medicare for all lane in an authentic way, and I think that would have been helpful for Dean. But no, I think if it's similar to the Andrew thing, like we can, if you guys want, and that's fine if you're listening to this, like if it is helpful for you to blame leadership for the losses, like blame me. That's great. Like I'm happy. I will. That's my cross to bear, I guess, and I'm happy to, because I think we should believe in the politicians and people that you're voting for. But I don't really think either of those campaigns were lost based on bad management. Like there are plenty of things I messed up. Don't get me wrong. Like things that, I would manage the budget a little bit differently, or handle that staff challenge differently, or not hired this person or hired that person, or would I've been, I would have prevented the whipped cream thing or something, in the Yankees race, like, one of these stupid things. Sure. Right. But
was there a moment where you could have stopped that whipped cream thing, or did it just happen in a split
second? It would have had to be like, it's time to go home, and that's it. I would have had to just know in hindsight, like, I did prevent it as soon as I could, seemingly. I guess I maybe could have grabbed it earlier. I don't really know. I remember I was driving. I had to drive him. I drove us from New Hampshire to New York, I think, that night. And I would drive a lot because we had a lot of people from the city that couldn't drive or were too young to drive. They have to be over 25. And I just remember my phone just going berserk as I'm driving. And I was like, Andrew, I think we have a problem, but I can't tell. I'm driving.
Did you guys realize, like, did you think after, like, oh, nobody will notice, it's not big a deal? Or did you know right away, like, oh, this is going to be a big one?
You hope. You're like, I hope that looked better on the film than it did in real life.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
All right. Two more quick ones for you, Zach.
Sure.
And then we'll let you go. Jon Stewart, is he an option?
Oh, wow. I would love for Jon Stewart to run. I think Jon Stewart is, like anybody, I don't agree with him everything, but I think he's so good for the Democratic Party because he makes a rational Democratic argument. He makes a rational, thoughtful Democratic policy argument, and has for a long time. If you watch him, the early Daily Show, I mean, he was exceptional in that show, generally speaking. And I think but if you want to watch one thing in Jon Stewart, watch his rant about paying the 9/11 families. It's world masterclass on public speaking and thoughtfully conveying. Like, Jon Stewart is, I think, really, really talented. I think he's way better since he left Apple. He seems to have some more freedom and is kind of being himself. He seems to be a rational person, and I think rational people at this point in the world would make a better president than most of our options. So, because I think the system kind of incentivizes irrational behavior or narcissistic behavior. I don't think he has that at his core. So, and I think he's a man of integrity. So I love that idea, and I'll do my part to try and convince him through my own channels.
I'd pay money to see him debate Vance. I think
that's the thing. He's like, you can put people in a body bag debating. He's just like, he says, the problem is that the right argues really well with, many times flawed, but they use a version of logic to defend their points. And the Dems will use emotion, and it doesn't work. And I think really there are plenty of people that I think are smart, thoughtful people that have gone to the right. And I believe it's because sometimes there's some truth on the right, and they lean that way. But I think other times there's just no one's making a good case for the left. I think Pete's done a really good job. I think Jon Stewart's done a really good job. I think Mark Cuban tried, and he was better than a lot of options. But there's not a lot of kind of average, like, let's call it rational populism out there, and rational policy points being made on the left, and it drives me nuts. And Yang does it well. but there's not that many.
Yeah. Zach, what are you working on now? Like anything you can share about what you're up to, or how people can kind of stay and be aware of what your latest thoughts are on things?
I'm working on, got a new startup cooking. You'll know more in Q1, Q2, I guess, when we launch. I try not to tweet that often because I find there's a lot more downside than upside at times. But if I do have interesting stuff, I'll probably put it on Twitter or Instagram. I guess it's just Zach Graumann. You can find me. And then I'm on Yang's podcast every once in a while to keep in touch with y'all. Because honestly, I mean this so sincerely. It's why I always want to always come on when I can, Tom. It's like, I love you guys from the bottom of my heart. And you are, to me, what made the Yang Gang so special and what made that campaign so special, but also what I think makes this country really special too. There are a lot of, and I think I heard this from a lot of Yang Gang folks. There's like, this campaign gives me hope for our country and for my community, and for it was a positive movement, and there was a lot of good and wonderful people involved in that entire thing. And that hope's still there. It hasn't gone away. It's just, we've taken a couple L's, folks, and we maybe fix that. But it ain't gone. It ain't dead. And it's like the Dumbledore quote. It's like, you don't have to worry about when you're in the darkness. If you want it to end, all you got to do is turn on the light, So keep turning on the light, folks.
I love it. Well, Zach, I will let you go, and I appreciate the inspirational quote, my friend.
Anytime, man. I got a bunch of them. I've got dad jokes and corny, stupid stuff all the time. Anyway, Tom, love you guys. Stay awesome.
Bye, nerds. See you later, Zach. All right. Zach Graumann. Good dude. Excited to see what he launches, I guess, early next year in his entrepreneurial journey. Let me share some kind of thoughts on my side about our conversation and in general as we wrap up. But before I do that, let me thank our channel members who basically keep this show running. Every now and then I'm like, I don't know, man, maybe I should take a little break from making content for Nerds for Humanity. And then I remember, like, well, I've got these channel members who support the channel, so let's keep running it. So thanks again to all the channel members, and let me call out some of them in particular. Let's see here. Share screen. Here we go. Oh, we have a new member of the Nerd Cabinet. P4R7H. Am I pronouncing that wrong? P4-7H. Poor 7H. Well, however one pronounces your name, P4R7H, who's in the live chat right now and is a big fan of Zach's. It's Leet Speak. Well, I'll try and practice that for next time and be better. And then we've got Soldier One, who has been a member of the cabinet for 42 months. Oh, so P4-7H has been supporting our channel for almost 2 years, and then he upgraded to the cabinet position. Oh, it's Parth. Ah! Love it. Can't believe I didn't catch that. Yeah, agree. Of course it's Parth. Shoot. Although I think I feel like I should refer to Parth as P4-7H from now on, just because. All right, then next level down, underneath the cabinet, we have the Congress, Kristen Slevin, Bike, and Zig PC. And then we have our city council members, Gene, David, DK, Jackalego, Mr. History, Mona, Vaughn, Yang, Dean, Galessa, Jay Parandana, Jason, Daniel, Jeremy, Mickey Jackson, and Kiyu. And then we have registered nerds who, it's $1.99 a month. And some of these registered nerds are freaking almost 5 years of support. So I'm going to scroll through so you can see all of their amazing names, including T's in the live chat. A lot of people who make this channel possible. So thank you all. All right. So one last promo is the Nerds for Humanity newsletter, which is free. And so if you're ever like, oh, I like the Nerd Show, but sometimes I don't get the live stream notifications, I always publish a summary on my Substack, and you'll see here, like, it's a nice little text summary, structured. Yes, it is written by AI, but it's written by AI off of the transcript of the actual interview. So, and then if you remember, I try and give a shout out to members in the Substack as well. I think I'll make sure I give a shout out to P4H7R, before H7R, also known as Parth. The other thing is I am taking a little hiatus from Twitter. So if you guys are on Blue Sky, you can follow me. My handle is Nerds for Humanity on Blue Sky. I find it a little more tame over there. Twitter just, I don't know, it's taken a turn in the recent couple years. Okay, so what am I'm going to give you 3 takeaways. Number 1 is I kind of agree with Zach that there wasn't much Dean Phillips could have done to change the outcome. Maybe he could have done better in New Hampshire if he had probably gone harder for ceasefire, but I don't know that he was ready to go there. Because I kind of agree with Zach that the Dean message was Biden's, not the explicit message, but the only message that people remembered was that Biden's too old, which was true. But at the time, it felt kind of, you're just politics by subtraction kind of thing. So that's point 1. The related point is, if you've ever worked on a political campaign, like, hats off to you. I mean, I only did 3 weeks, but I did most of that time on the advanced team, which anybody who works on an advanced team in a political campaign, like, those are, I think they're the hardest working people. It's definitely not a 50-year-old man's job, in my opinion. But it was a once in a lifetime experience for me. Takeaway 2 is, I think we saw Kamala being the same kind of candidate that she was in 2020. And she had a great start, but, didn't have the athleticism as a campaigner to handle things like what would you have done differently, to be out there more. And frankly, even if she did, I don't know if it would have changed anything. I mean, from the Biden administration, it's just, it's a hard sell. And then takeaway 3 is that in terms of the future, I agree with Zach that we got to kind of regroup. I'm going to probably focus most of my efforts on open primaries and ranked choice voting in California. That's a multi-year effort, but, maybe, I think Zach kind of alluded to this, where if Andrew ran again, as important as UBI is, there are probably other ways to address the root cause of our problems. And I kind of think the current 2-party closed primary system and then the plurality voting, it just produces these, fire, like grenade throwers that don't end up doing any work, and that just are famous for being famous. I mean, look at Matt Gaetz. Like, how did that man not only win his congressional seat, but then rise to such a level of prominence through his sort of, his social media kind of outrage, media kind of approach, like, becomes the nominee for attorney general. That is freaking crazy. So I do think open primaries and ranked choice voting would produce candidates who appeal to more people. Like, people like Dean Phillips would probably do well in ranked choice voting, because I think he would appeal to more more of a majority, or have a better chance getting a majority than certainly others would. But there you have it. And my last takeaway for you all is keep an eye on Pete Buttigieg. I think he's got the goods. I know a lot of people in Yang Gang didn't like him in 2020, but it's about winning, guys. And that guy's a pretty good candidate and a good campaigner. And to Zach's point, he won Iowa. He's smart. He's got even more experience, so he won't be quite as young, which is a good thing because he kind of came across too young last time. And he's not afraid to kind of throw down on Fox News and OAN, which is super cool. So there you have it. Let me know in the comments what you think for 2028, and if you're planning on doing any local activism in the meantime, maybe joining forces with the rest of us trying to push harder for open primaries and ranked choice voting. But with that, I'm going to say bye, nerds, and don't forget to subscribe to the Substack, and you'll get a written summary of this stream and all of my future streams. Peace out. Bye, nerds.